So turns out I got it wrong with Lewis Hamilton's lap deletion. If you saw it, I put out a short just before the race, and I kind of put the blame... No. I put the blame for Lewis Hamilton's lap deletion squarely on the shoulders of the FIA. Turns out I was wrong about that. So Ferrari fitted a barely tested suspension component to Hamilton's car, and it really threw off the handling, the balance of the SF25 of Lewis Hamilton, which I think is what caused Lewis Hamilton's spin out during free practice, his mediocre sprint race, and ultimately the lap deletion when he had a track limits violation on turn 4, aka Eau Rouge. So overnight, before the race started, Ferrari actually remedied the situation. They removed that suspension component, and we all saw the results of that fix. And this might have been the most significant race of Lewis Hamilton's kind of latter portion of his career. And I'm going to go ahead and argue that it's not just the most important race of his time at Ferrari, but, possibly even since Abu Dhabi in 2021. I'll get into that a little bit more later, but I want to talk about the driver standings a little bit. So Oscar Piastri, and I had kind of long suspected that Oscar Piastri was going to be the dominant driver over at McLaren. I didn't think it was going to be so quick. So Oscar Piastri leads the driver standings. He's at 266 points. Lando Norris is at 250. And shockingly, of course, Max Verstappen is in third place right now with 185 points. And that is just ahead of George Russell with 157. I don't think that George Russell is going to catch Max Verstappen. I don't think that the current Mercedes cars have the pace. I think, if anything, if Charles Leclerc keeps driving the way he did at the Belgian Grand Prix, and if Ferrari continues to kind of remedy its problems, I think he has got more of a chance of catching Max Verstappen than does George Russell. Let's check in really quick on the constructors' standings. One might say that Ferrari is having a terrible year, but they are actually P2 in the Constructors' Championship, and I think they may have turned a corner, and they might end up extending that lead against Mercedes. So Ferrari is standing at 248, Mercedes is at 220. Meanwhile, Red Bull Racing is at 192, and we kind of have to consider that Red Bull Racing is kind of a one-man show right now. Max Verstappen is the only driver that is consistently scoring points and finishing high in the races. Now, there's a rumor that Red Bull has been holding on to upgrade parts and only giving those parts to Max Verstappen's car and kind of holding on to them in case some of the parts break, and that is possibly why the second car has been suffering so much in the hands of everyone from Checo to Tsunoda to Lawson and everything. And whether or not that's true, I do not know, but that has been kind of the rumor. I want to check in on news real quick. The intra-team battle at McLaren, it's starting to heat up. You could see just how close Oscar and Lando have been driving. You can see the strategy from the pit wall seeming to kind of favor Oscar Piastri more than Lando Norris. And, I think it was telling. Remember when the pit wall told Lando Norris to give Oscar Piastri a place back, even though he was 6 seconds ahead of Oscar Piastri? That turned into the scandal with a whole bunch of strange radio communications happening. Now, I think that hurt Lando Norris's opportunities to maintain his dominance at McLaren. I think it hurt pretty badly. Maybe he should have just said, F this and I'm going for the win, much like a Max Verstappen would have done, or a Lewis Hamilton would have done, or maybe even a Sainz, would have done. But instead, he did cede that position to Oscar Piastri, and I feel like it's kind of been a downhill story for Lando Norris ever since. Lando Norris had a strange issue with the battery pack. He came over the radio and was saying, hey, I've got no pack. I was kind of expecting McLaren to come back over the radio and say, everything's fine. We're not sure exactly what you're talking about. But they came back over and said that Lando Norris had exhausted his battery. And had Lando Norris not been driving neck and neck with Oscar Piastri when that radio communication came over, that may have been a satisfactory answer. But Lando and Oscar were driving neck and neck, and for some reason, or at least it wasn't communicated over the radio, Oscar Piastri didn't suffer the same negative consequence of the battery pack. And then there was a pit stop for Lando Norris, one of the only pit stop of the day. We didn't have many interruptions besides the couple of laps at the beginning of the race. Slow pit stop for Lando Norris as compared to a very quick pit stop, changing from the inters to the mediums for Oscar Piastri. That definitely cost Lando some time. And again, when you put those two things together, it really does seem like they're favoring Oscar Piastri to the detriment of Lando Norris. Now, this happens all the time. This happens all the time in Formula One. One driver does become the favorite of the team, and especially when you've got a championship on the line, the first championship to be won by someone other than Max Verstappen in the last 4 years. They're really trying to make sure that they're giving that championship to the driver that they think can defend it. And I think, especially when you see how Oscar Piastri drives against Max Verstappen, I think that, wisely, McLaren is putting their eggs into the Oscar Piastri basket. Couple of notable things during the Belgian Grand Prix. I have got to say, I was pretty impressed by Liam Lawson finishing in 8th, and I was very impressed by Alex Albon in a Williams finishing in 6th and holding off the advance from Lewis Hamilton, especially in the latter part of the race. Max Verstappen, of course, finishing in P4. He never gives up during his races, no matter what kind of car he's driving and the status of his second driver. And then Charles Leclerc finishing on the podium, P3. So let's quickly get back into Lewis Hamilton's race and why I think that it is the most important race that he's had in the last, since 2021. If it's 2021, it's been years. I don't get the sense that Ferrari was listening to his feedback quite as much as they should have. But then to have a 7.5-time world champion spin out in free practice, get a track limits violation, and a lap deletion, that is a huge, huge embarrassment. And it doesn't matter if you have an ego that kind of supersedes the advice of a driver. Once that driver starts spinning out, and clearly Lewis Hamilton is no rookie, you've got a bad car. You've done some bad stuff in development, and they finally had to listen to Lewis Hamilton. And also they had to listen to him with strategy. I was listening to another podcaster, and he pointed out the fact that when Lewis Hamilton began his attack that resembled Lewis Hamilton of old, Ferrari's radio basically went silent. And this podcaster said Ferrari was no longer managing Lewis Hamilton or advising Lewis Hamilton. They were just sitting back and watching Lewis Hamilton work. And I'm sure watching him go from 18th to 7th place in an extremely controlled manner. It was controlled aggression. When he passed Liam Lawson on the straight, he got really close to Liam Lawson, but you could kind of see that he wanted, actually, you know what? I've got a couple of models, a couple of car models. I'm gonna break those out, get fancy. Okay. So you're just going to have to imagine that this is a Racing Bulls car. So on the straight, you could see Lewis Hamilton as Liam Lawson's car was kind of pulling to the right. Lewis Hamilton did not have the space, but then before you go into turn 5, you do kind of have to bring your car over to the left-hand side so you can get to the apex. And I do think that Lewis Hamilton wanted Liam Lawson to believe that he was coming over so that he could maybe take the pass in the middle part of the circuit. And so he came very, very close, looked like he was following him over to the left-hand side, and then at the very last second, passed. And, you know, that speaks a little bit to the straight line speed of Hamilton's car versus Liam Lawson's. But I have to say, because there wasn't another opportunity, like no safety car or anything to adjust, you know, the downforce, the straight line speed of Lewis Hamilton's car wasn't quite up to the straight line speed of Charles Leclerc. And so he pulled out every trick in the book, all of his, you know, wealth of experience to get those overtakes done, and eventually ended up getting driver of the day. Like I mentioned, Ferrari sat back and watched Lewis Hamilton work, and I'm sure the Tifosi, they had to have been like, hey, that is, you know, that's what we wanted to see out of Lewis Hamilton coming to Ferrari. And I'm sure that Ferrari management was also like, that's what we wanted to see out of Lewis Hamilton coming to Ferrari. I'm hopeful that this was a turning point in Hamilton's career, and I'm hoping that he has earned the respect of his engineers and management over at Ferrari, and that they listen to not just him, but to Charles Leclerc moving forward. And I also think that some of the front runners have had a little bit of a habit of not listening to their drivers. Mercedes is definitely one of them, and Red Bull, I think, is another. Like, who knows how much Max Verstappen himself had to do with the dilemma between, you know, the first car, the second car. Maybe it was Jost, maybe it was Helmut Marko, who was making sure that Max Verstappen's car got fed the good parts, even to the detriment of the second driver. But I think once these front runners start to listen again, I think they're going to find a little bit more success, and I think that the field is going to even out a little bit more. Now, that might have to wait until 2026 because we're a little bit far gone in the season for any huge gains. McLaren is in the lead for the Constructors' Championship, 516 points. The runner-up in Ferrari, they're only at 248. So, save for some unforeseen craziness over at McLaren, I think that they are marching toward a victory, or toward 2 victories, and I think Oscar Piastri is going to end up taking that Drivers' Championship. And I think, you know, while Lando Norris might be naturally faster, Oscar Piastri, I think, is just a little bit more the hardcore racer. Now, honorable mention to Williams and to Sauber, 5th and 6th, respectively, in the Constructors' Championship. Now, 70 points versus 43 points it's not really a candle they can hold up compared to the 516 points of McLaren. But given where they're coming from, that is awfully impressive. All right, well, that's it for the Monday video, but enjoy. I will be back to doing some shorts this week. Hopefully I get it right this time. And until then, I have been Dalton. This has been The Petrolist, and you have been great. Thanks for watching. I'm out.